Hi everyone, I'm Maneka Helleberg, Chairman of World Freedom Alliance. I'm here today with Mick Stott from the UK, and I'm so honored and happy to have you with us, Mick. You've been with us from the start. I remember I met you first time on Trafalgar Square. Do you remember?
Yeah.
It was like a battlefield.
It was, yeah. We actually did the security for that day, and they didn't manage to get to break the security fence down at all because we tied
No.
all of the barriers together. Yeah.
No, it was amazing, and I remember you were there with all your friends, ex-army friends, and but please, Mick, just tell me a little bit about your background and how did you come into, becoming, one of the foremost freedom fighters in the UK, and you've been inspiring so many people in the world and in the UK to really stand up for their rights and know their rights and live their rights. Yeah, please.
It's all really started, Maneka, with I came back from Asia. I was working with international sport in Asia and international business, and as a consultant. And I'd been out there for about 4 or 5 years. And when I came back, it became very, very apparent that things weren't quite right. I then initiated my own business over here, started to speak at some events, and started to realize then that things were changing according to COVID, the way the government wanted us to follow this sort of narrative or protocol. And the thing that I couldn't really get my head around was it didn't make any sense. So I started to dig a little bit. What I recognized very, very quickly, having served in the British Army for 30 years and been involved in the preparation of men and women physically and mentally to fight war, there is a process that goes with that. What I started to recognize was the correlation between what we were experiencing as members of the public and what we used to do. Then for me, it looked like a psyop. And of course, the British military are renowned for doing psyops. Is it any surprise that when you started to dig a little bit, that you realized that they'd got psychological operation teams that were working as part of the government? I then found out that the Ofcom had censored the mainstream press in the UK, which for me was a big flag, because being military, when someone takes over a country, one of the first things they do is dominate communications. Of course, the mainstream media is the most dominant means of communication throughout the world. So I wasn't really aware of who owned the mainstream media and why that might be the case. But as I started to dig, that became apparent. And for me, having spent 30 years in the military, you realize just how governments lie like cheap watches. And that the people that are often in those governments have absolutely no character anyway. So they're very, very good at taking care of themselves, but not necessarily interested in the general population. You seldom see their children, in the field of combat. That's for the likes of me and the council house owners and the other young guys and girls that basically join the military with this ideology that you're serving Queen and country. Once you start to dig and you realize that's a false representation of everything that's been presented to you, it's quite a jolt. And so that's what I started to realize.
No, but I think, a lot of people, I've also talked to, ex-police and military here in Sweden who they join the police and the military to serve the people.
Yeah.
To make sure that they protect democracy, they protect our freedoms. I mean, this is such an important job, to really, that's the kind of front line to protect people. And
the thing that really started to get me to question things, and I watched Dolores Cahill speak, and she had the world I came from. Essentially, all of your post-nominals determine your credibility. And of course, that's really the world that a lot of people live in. If you have post-nominals after your name and you are a doctor or a lawyer, then you automatically gain this level of credibility. I don't totally believe that's true, because when I look at some of the people that I've met, they're certainly questionable at best, and they're malleable at worst. And this is how it's transpired. But I watched Dolores speak, and she made absolute sense to me. So I then decided to go to Trafalgar Square, to listen to her speak. That was where I really woke up, and I started to realize then that something was seriously wrong. We were being manipulated behaviorally, we were being influenced unethically, we were being censored. And for me, these are all the hallmarks of a form of takeover. And certainly as I watched Boris Johnson's speech of 2019 to the EU, he spelled it out letter by letter exactly where we were going. And that's exactly what is unfolding right now. But what saddened me is that a lot of people don't even bother to look. They just take the mainstream media at face value. They take politicians at face value and believe that these people really have their interests at heart, when in reality they're just puppets of a much greater system. So that was the point at which I woke up, and then I came across and joined the World Freedom Alliance. And it was lovely working with the World Freedom Alliance because you had so many different flavors of people. And I came across to Sweden and Denmark, and we did some other things, and acted as a bit of a focal point for security and some of the internal communications. What I then realized was that in reality, in my home turf, I could make more of an impact by focusing on the home turf. And for me, the gap was that no group of people have ever really followed one person willingly. And I saw an awful lot of people in the UK trying to become leaders of groups. Well, I was never interested in that, because for me, what we needed was a system that they could follow. And the only system that made sense to me was the system of common law, and supported by the Constitution. So for me, that's a system that can be leaderless, because ultimately it's a system that speaks at the level of existence, in so much that, if you follow the basic premise of common law, cause no harm, loss or injury to any other person, and be honourable in your contracts. If everybody did that, we would have a premise on which we could live cooperatively and collaborate with each other. And I think if you look at the small villages and you go to the town I'm in, that's very much that mentality. We have a very small community, and we seem to just actively take care of each other. And if we have any disagreements, we have open dialogue.
Exactly. And I think, I've been talking in other interviews about that a lot, how this psychological operation that is that I think is conscious on the global community is attacking those fundamental human values at its heart. Like you said, act in honor, do no harm. And what is happening in the world? Well, there's harm being done. The honor is being attacked. Like there's, like you say, if that would be restored in the local community.
Simple rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, of course, it's never that simple. However, those simple rules used to be taught in schools. So common law used to be taught in schools. And of course, as we stray away from that kind of philosophy, what's the alternative to that? If you look at communities now, and you look at the way the government want things to go, it's about serving yourself. It is about breaking up communities. It's about breaking up the family unit. The PSYOP is all about that, disrupting your everyday routines. Because the more confusion you can create, the more highly suggestible people become. And then the most hypnotic thing you can ever have in your home is a television. I never watched a television. I never watched the news. I never watched anything to do with mainstream media. Because, when I was in the military, I was a casualty. I was part of a casualty reporting cell. So when some of the conflicts were on, we would be seeing what was going on real time. We'd have access to what was going on real time. We'd watch what the mainstream media were putting out, and there was disparity between the two. The two did not match. And even at that point, I was sort of going, wow, well, what are they reporting? Because this is not what we're seeing live. And we were literally right at the first line reporting end of everything that was going on in those conflict arenas. So for me, there were question marks a little bit early on, but I became more savvy when I came out. And because, through you learn, just if you look across the world, tribal mentalities have dominated in lots of different spaces, because we are herd animals, whichever way you look at it. So to break the herd up, this is what they've tried to do. They've used PSYOPs to do that. So for me, what I decided to do was to create the Guardians 300. And the Guardians 300, the first thing we did We ran 197 programs throughout the UK in the first month and a half of us initiated. Now, a lot of people wouldn't know that because we didn't really want to advertise that. You know, if you go into combat, the last thing you do is tell the opposing force your strategy. So we went out and did that. I personally trained in excess of about 90 trainers. Those trainers are still out there today doing their own trainings. And the training is literally about, let's get you back to something that comes from the divine anyway. A lot of people wouldn't appreciate that common law comes from the divine and you know, a natural law. So these are not things that are just emerged overnight. They're things that have actually been forgotten for the purpose of governments to basically be able to manipulate and take money from the people they're supposed to help. So for me, to create one system that's about the system was really useful, because if the sum of the parts is greater than any one whole, it will work. But if it becomes about one person, it's doomed. So we want communities having their own rules within their own communities based on where they live even. I mean, you know, if you go to Cornwall, they will have a different outlook to the people in Manchester. And so common law, because it's set at the level of natural law, that message is easy to translate, because there's enough space within it for people to operate colloquially. So it translates on its own. It doesn't need a leader, because in reality, what common law does is give you back your power. It says to you, well, actually, what you should do is you should truth find. You should find all of the facts and then make a decision based on your own conscience. Exactly. And that makes you truly sovereign. So we needed a system that we believe would be attractive enough that equally, as the PSYOP continues and the government try to do what they're doing, that when people start to wake up, they understand that there's already a system that's functioning that they can join, and that is more naturally attractive because it has less control. It allows you to exercise your inalienable freedoms. Now, these are not given to you by governments; they're yours by right of birth. So that system is attractive purely because it's very natural; it's divine, essentially. And as this has gone on, you know, G300 has continued to train, and we train tens of thousands of people now.
Wow, amazing.
And indirectly, just by the fact that we got out there and started training as quickly as we did, we also initiated other organizations that were actually scared that we were going to take over. So that kicked them into gear, and they started training other people as well. So it had a nice ripple effect. And as long as people are being empowered and becoming sovereign, I don't really care what flavor they have. Because ultimately, when people become sovereign, they know what's right. And if you look at all of the current confusions around LGBTQ and, you know, what they're trying to introduce into schools with children that are highly suggestible and easily influenced at certain ages, for me, these are all confusions that they're installing to break up what we consider to be a set of values that keep us following no loss, no harm, no injury, and being honorable. All of those things make us stray away from those. But that's not by chance. If you look at some of the ridiculous things that are put in the papers with regards to guidance of how to have sex during monkeypox, these are things that are just meant to make you go, what the hell are they saying? And what they simply do is they install confusion. You know, one of the first principles of mass hypnosis is install confusion. People become highly suggestible when they're confused. And you can do this by interrupting their routines daily. Look at how they did that. You can do this by breaking up the sense of touch.
I remember, you know, talking about confusion, there's so many, you know, I've been watching, I don't watch TV either, but I watch some statements, you know, from governments, from the Swedish government and from others to just see what's going on. And I remember the Swedish government, a representative from the Swedish health authorities come out and say that, yes, well, we know now that the injections don't give protection more than 3 weeks, but everyone should get injected. You know, just that statement of course, it's contra, you know, it's completely confused.
Well, you're a teacher, aren't you, Maneka? So you would know that
yes.
if you have two teachers in the same classroom, and one teacher says 2 + 2 = 4, and the other teacher says 2 + 2 actually equals 5, for somebody that does not know what's going on, who do they believe? So all you've simply done at that moment is you've created nothing other than confusion. And if you look at the wear masks, don't wear masks, if you look at all of the strategies that they've used, they're all perfect strategies for psyops. But that's what they're designed to be. So this is why sovereignty is about find your truth, find the facts, make a decision based on your own conscience. And what you generally find is that people do know right from wrong.
Exactly.
It's just that they're not given a collective opportunity to voice that and for that to be fed back to them, because in reality,
I mean, just the fact that in the EU now officially we have censorship, you know, of RT, Russia Today, people cannot go to the sources that they want and get the information that they want. I mean, what I do as a teacher, actually, you get taught to find your own sources and to be critical against the sources. So what I do is, like, I go to the official sources of the Russian government, like in the Ukraine conflict. I go to you know, other governments official, and I listen to both sides, and then I listen to people on the ground that I have the privilege to know, okay, what are they saying going on directly from.
Well, and then any analyst,
and then I make my decision.
Totally, you know? And any analyst, Maneka, would call that triangulation of information. So you don't just get it from one source, you triangulate it and then come to a conclusion. But you see, we become so trusting.
That's complete common sense, that I have a responsibility to really find out for myself what is going on. And like you said, I guess I grew up also with really seeing for myself the gap between reality and what the media writes about, because as you know, my father is a medical doctor that's been standing up for patients' rights and everything.
Your father's a very funny man as well.
Yes.
And a good singer.
Yes, and also part of World Freedom Line starting up and everything. But you know, they completely tried to smash him, you know, in the mainstream media and everything, because he started out, you know, doing a bestseller in the United States, you know, curing depression, this and that. But when he came to cancer, to back pain and those things, when he was actually able to do a lot about those diseases, then they were like, no, we need to smash him in the media.
Well, of course, and the thing is,
for all my life, you know, if I hadn't seen that, if I hadn't seen that gap for myself,
and I was amazed because when I came out to Sweden, when I came back, I went down with flu or whatever it was, right? And you know, your dad's words resonated in my ears. Co-vitamins, he called them, right? So I was taking liposomal Vit C, and all I did was take vitamins and drink some tea, which Vicky prepared, and I was amazed at how quickly I recovered compared to some other guys that really weren't natural in their mindset. So for me, it's all about influence, isn't it? And of course, I now won't do anything outside of a naturopathic type approach, because I believe that everything that has been modeled from the pharmaceutical industry has had to have a natural source to model anyway. So it exists already. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to access it and use it. And certainly, you know, don't underestimate the power of pine needle tea. So it's all there, isn't it? It's all there in Mother Nature. And of course,
definitely.
And that's the connection to sovereignty. You know, as we become more sovereign, we do tend to seek more answers. What's happened is we become too trusting.
Exactly.
And why wouldn't we? We believe that there's been choice for since the last war.
And kind of living in a pink little bubble, you know, of everything is taken care of for us. And especially in Sweden, you know, we haven't been involved in any wars actively for a long time. And Swedish people are like, yes, of course, we trust the government, and okay, everything is fine as long as we do what we're told. And they're in this pink little bubble. And
and we believe, you know, we believe that they're taking care of us, you see, but actually they're not. They're just preparing us and manipulate. If you look at the education system, You know, they're now teaching masturbation to children of 6 years of age.
Oh my God.
So for me, when you start to look at why would you have to teach a child of that age anything around their genitalia? Why would you have to? And you know, we've got a teacher next door, and we were asking her about this the other day, and this is how trusting people have become. Because our first question was, why? And she said, oh, it's only X, Y, and Z. I said, well, why can't she learn that at home? Why can't she learn that naturally? And she said, I never even thought of asking why. And you wouldn't, because what's happened is you now have a centralized body that are dictating what everyone in the UK learns. But the question is, who influences that?
Exactly.
You know, our family's daughters go to a very, very well-to-do private school. I was looking at the uniform the other day and I saw a Chinese insignia on it. And I started to sort of go, well, hang on a minute, what is the Chinese insignia doing on that school uniform? Now, what you start to realize is that there are other influences that are coming into our society. And if you then start to look at, as a soldier, you learn to pay attention, right? So when somebody puts out their battle plan, you take that pretty seriously, and then you flex around it. When someone tells you that they're going to ruin the West through economic strategies, then you start to find out how many people are buying up English schools. The most influential body of people outside of mum and dad are teachers, because that's where children spend the majority of their time, outside of mum and dad. So whatever those teachers are told to develop or put out there is the influence that our children are having, whether we like it or not. And of course, we love to be open-minded in the UK, but you know something? You can be so open-minded that you actually lose your identity. And that's exactly what's going on with the government at the moment. We've forgotten how...
Always a balance. Of course, you know, everyone has the right freedom of choice, but not to do harm and not to go over the integrity, because that's what we're seeing. Like in Sweden,
you know, I would argue it.
Saying, you know, in Sweden, they want to have it obligatory from 3 years age to go to kindergarten. Like it's a law that you have to leave your kids to kindergarten at 3 years old. And then then the question arises, because, you know, we've had our kids at home for around 1.5 years now, because I'm a teacher as well, and I can, you know, do this better myself too. And they're not that old. And oh, now he's coming here. Ja, vänta gubben. Just a minute. Ja. Jag sitter i ett möte. Gjorde du det?
Jag satt den här och jag som motocrossen här.
Wow, he drove his new motorbike, orange motocross by himself.
Mamma, toppen ligger så jättehögt upp.
Gjorde du det?
Ja.
Grattis Nia.
We love him.
Talking about that.
Yeah.
He just got a new motocross bike, and he drove by himself. It's a bit big for him actually, and he jumped with a motorbike, so he just needed to tell me.
That's cool. That's great. No, you're right, Maneka. And the thing is, you know, if you go back to the school scenario, there are some things we're meant to find out naturally. We don't need something force-fed to our children by people who don't even know our children. If you were to ask the average teacher, what is her favorite food, they couldn't tell you that. And yet we're going to trust them to lead them into their sexuality. You know, I've had conversations with Victoria's daughters, you know, and what you start to realize is there is no adult perspective in some of the conversations they are having. And they don't have enough life experience to make some of the decisions that they are making. That's what, you know, parenthood is also about leadership. It's also, your children don't have the knowledge or the skill to make a decision. You lead them into making decisions. And then when they can make their own decisions, then that's fantastic. But you see, to say that all children have to do X, Y, or Z is a bit of a problem, because we're all completely unique. You know, I work in the arena of mental health, and that's where now my efforts have really been focused. The G300 is still rolling, it's still training. But I can tell you now, when I look at some of the kids that have been sent to boarding schools, and I look at some of the people that I work with, when I help them change their traumas You'd be amazed how many of those go right the way back to the years between 0 and 7, where they are being imprinted upon, and where they learn to do emotion, and where they learn experience and strategy. And of course, so for anyone to say that one rule fits all, I'm afraid doesn't it's not really paying attention to the individual needs.
No, exactly. And I think, hasn't this been under attack for a long time? This is not just recently, you know, the honorability, like really being an honorable person. Me and my husband Christopher were talking about this the other day. Like, how do we, because we want to live completely honorable and do no harm, and you know, act in honor, and to really live that, how do we do that? Because we haven't had any role models, really.
And you can't do it if you're not taught it. So it used to be taught in English schools. Common law was taught to children. So
important, and it comes back to, you know, in the Guardians 300. I mean, what you're doing is so important, because in a way it is to remind people of that honor, to remind people of what is really true, and what is really the true values that we've had as humanity for ages. This, I believe, you know, this is in our instincts. This is in our, like you said, in our spirit as humanity.
It is, yeah. It is. And all it needs to be is reminded of, and it needs to be rekindled. But if no one ever tells you what your inalienable rights are, I mean, you look how they've just ridden over, you know, what was Nuremberg about? Look what they've done to the Nuremberg Code. They broke every element of that code already. Exactly. And of course, because people aren't aware of it, we've forgotten the past. When you forget the past, you're in danger of making the mistakes that we made in the past if you don't learn from it.
Yeah.
And of course,
just a question for you. In the Guardians 300, I know that it's like a ripple effect that you create, like the trainers, and they train others, and then it's like a fractal, just ripple effect. But what is at the core of this training? How did you, what is it that I can actually remind people of this? Is it these rights, or are there many aspects of it?
Sovereignty. It's about you being sovereign. It's about you understanding, cause no loss, harm, or injury to anyone else, and be honourable in your contracts. And of course, essentially it's about personal power. Why should I rely on the government to give me a living? You know, if I'm a person that's literally living off the government, I've disempowered myself by the very nature of the fact that I've decided that. There's no judgment with that. There's an education that goes with it, because that person has never been taught to be powerful. They might never have had an opportunity for someone to empower them. So for me, the journey is one of personal power. So we're telling people, you know, essentially, you have the right to everything that is around you by the nature of the very fact you've been born here. And of course, unless you know that, unless people show you what that equals, even to the level of I create everything in my world. So when I do my programs around trauma, the first thing I want them to know is that their trauma was created by them, just by the very nature of the fact they were there, without blame and without judgment, because it's society and its community sometimes that nurture this blame and judgment. And personal power is about stepping outside of that and stepping into your own power. It's very powerful for me to know that that whatever I think and feel, I create. You know, it's a very powerful message that you give to someone, because when people are traumatized, they believe that everything is happening to them. But in reality, once they start to change their relationship with where they've been emotionally, that then empowers them individually. And of course, you know, there is no judgment with that, and it's a journey in itself. But sovereignty is about that. Sovereignty is about taking ownership for everything you do and taking responsibility for everything that you create. And when you get that message, that's a really, really powerful stance to stand in, because then you can get the higher messages. But until you're actually prepared to take ownership for everything you do, you're not really in a position to evolve at a higher level.
So this is, I mean, this is a bit sensitive, but you know, I know you've been, you know, in different circumstances where, you know, people tend to create a lot of drama, a lot of conflict, and also in the freedom movements all over the world, we see this.
Totally.
Like, oh, this is mine. Oh, I should speak. And no, you're not trustworthy. And this
all ego.
all ego. And I mean, for me, I'm, you know, mostly, of course, you know, I'm watching it and just seeing, you know, what is going on here. And for me, that's a part of the brainwash that's been imposed on us to create
Totally.
split and to create, you know, this kind of yeah, I'm so hurt, I'm a victim, you're doing something to
Totally.
me.
And then we will reward you for being a victim.
Exactly.
So you think how you can
victim,
you can reward someone for being a victim to the point where they have become a professional victim.
Mm.
You know, I have it with professional patients, and if they don't get any growth, they become incurable. No one is incurable. Everyone can grow if they have the will to grow.
Exactly.
And of course, as leaders, we part of our job as leaders is to initiate that growth, to give people enough confidence to believe that they can grow, because all of it comes down to confidence. When you see these people that want to be the head of this or lead that, or they want to take something down, that's all ego. And all of it is down to lack of confidence. They wouldn't know that, by the way. You know, when I see people tell lies, that's lost confidence. You know, if you can't stand in your authenticity as a sovereign being, the whole point of being sovereign is that you speak your inner truth from your heart, and you want to win and you want the other person to win. So we do that as much as we can. And if we do that, we then have agreement. But what I see with ego is that, you know, when people lack confidence, they tend to do things that really just are very destructive. But it is down to confidence. And if you've never been introduced to a system or an ideology, I mean, if you look at common law is about standing your own authenticity. If someone shows you how to do that, it's a very powerful space to put somebody. Because we can have disagreement.
Because then I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but if you can stand in that
totally
honestly and just say, okay, I made a mistake. I'm very sorry.
yeah.
I mean,
how many people can't say sorry?
I mean, it's I don't understand why it's too much complication all the time. Like, why complicate things so much?
Well, and you see, the thing is, Maneka, when you get back down to common law, it is really quite simple, because it comes from love. You know, it comes from the divine, because the divine actually is about an unlimited source of love, right? And when you stay away from love, you get into the world of complex lies. So when you start to get fearful, angry, guilty, hurt, or anxious, they create complexities. But if you cut all that back and you say, at the moment, I'm feeling a little bit angry, so I'm not going to bother having this exchange with you. When you start to realize these are your emotions, these are your complexities, you can take ownership. But I see so many people projecting this onto other people because they don't understand what projection is. They don't understand what ownership is. And of course, when you start to own your own emotion, that's emotional intelligence. And a lot of people out there, even emotional intelligence is not taught in schools. They say it is, but it's not. Actually, when you start,
I think also, like, people are so used to being in codependent, in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see this in the World Freedom Alliance. Even though I'm the chair, I don't feel like I'm a leader of anything. I'm just trying to lift all the good things up, lift others up and be of service, to the charter, being of service to actually making things work.
Well, if I look at the experience I had with the World Freedom Alliance, a fantastic body of people, and they know where they want to go. Dolores is probably one of the most, I didn't really spend much time with you, Maneka, individually. I spent a bit more time with Dolores individually. She's probably the most congruent person I've met, in so much that when we traveled back from Sweden and I drove her back, she stood by everything that she talked about. She didn't wear a mask. She refused to wear a mask. She refused to comply to any of that psyop bullshit that they're giving us. That's congruence, and it's courage. And of course, to be sovereign, you have to be taught courage. Is it any coincidence that our boys don't have a rites of passage? Our boys are now more bothered about how they look. Is my face okay? Is my flipping hair okay? Than they are as to whether or not they're actually turning into a man. I see, your child comes in early and is riding a motorbike, right? Some people would go, oh my God, they can't do that. You know what I mean?
Since he was 3 years old.
Well, and we teach our kids, if we're not careful, to be helpless. If we don't give them the rites of passage, if we don't give them, you know, what's going to make you grow is not what's given to you, it's what's taken away from you. And of course, sovereignty is about that. And the G300 is, you know, it's gone out there, and equally, we've still got trainers that are working internationally. They're working with people in Israel. So they're working all over the place. We're connecting with churches now.
Amazing.
And there's a whole network of people within churches. And I believe that when people stand in their, look, having been to work in prisons, the one thing that saves someone in prison is when they start to believe there's something higher than themselves. And whichever way you look at it, you can call it what you like. You know, I'm not a Christian man. I'm not a God-fearing man on any level. I just believe that there's an unlimited source of love, and it comes from somewhere. That's my undeniable experience, because when I get people back in touch with their love, the trauma disappears. So that's my undeniable experience, and I can measure that by the thousands of people that I've sat with on one-to-ones getting rid of trauma. And of course, they get rid of it. So you talk about a codependency, right? We've never had a codependency, because I always want people to stand in their own power. And
exactly. And I think that's what I was coming to, you know, also as chair, a lot of people, you know, tell me what to do. They think I should do this and that, and I should take care of something for them. And my answer is like, well, go and do it, please.
Totally. And you know, on all of our trainings, because we expect people to do, when they do the Peace Constable training, quite often when it comes to stand and talking down a bailiff, that's a scary step to take. And then you start to see the thinkers from the doers. You know, and it's about doing. I remember witnessing your husband stand in front of 6 police officers and hold his ground. And I thought, that boy's got minerals. And he's only got minerals because he's clearly had some sort of rite of passage, and that might be his rite of passage. But essentially, he stood in his power. And what the government don't want us to do is to stand in our power. Once we stand in our power, we realise the illusion that they've created. Exactly. And of course, the Wizard of Oz disappears, doesn't it? You realise it's just this big, fat prime minister that really has got no character, and it's all huff and bluff, and just happens to have these teeth that he uses to do his bidding. Well, I can tell you now, that's a false economy. And it's an economy that's gonna die out in the not too distant.
For sure. And is there anything else you'd like to say about the Guardians and what you're teaching? Because I know you're also teaching not just sovereignty, but also about, you know, food supply, about, you know, different aspects of being sovereign.
Well, there's an awful lot of communities that are growing in the UK now, Maneka. What they're doing is they're creating organisations that have all of those pillars: food, money, fuel. They're already looking at different sources for those, because let's face it, you know, England didn't become a great country because it sat on its backside when everything was going on. It got off its backside and looked and created. And of course, that's where we're at now. So there's lots of communities that are doing that. What we're providing is models of excellence. Now, our model of excellence actually is mental health. So we have a mental health model called Spectrum that literally we've got the Happiness Accelerator program, which we're going to be delivering to everyone. And so we're going to be doing that. We train our own coaches, we've got our own trainers. And of course, this system is something that we're going to be rolling out throughout the UK as part of those groups. So it will be the mental health model. Mainly because it gets results. I mean, even before COVID, we were getting results that the mainstream system was not getting results, because the NICE model is a bit like a self-licking lollipop, really. It only funds itself, it only researches itself, and it's only interested in itself. There's seldom does anything come and get introduced to it outside of what it stands for. And some people might say, well, that's great because that's quality assurance. Well, actually, no, it's blinkered. Because when something works and you can prove that it works, it works. And you know, being analytical, I set out really early on to prove academically that what we do gets the kind of results that we talk about. So that's a system that is going out there pretty quickly, and it's going to be going out from here forward. We've literally just put a few more dots and crossed a few more T's. And we're now in a position where we're launching that across the UK. And of course, I have no doubt it'll go out internationally because we're going to make it web-based. We've got the trainers that are running with the G300 anyway, and that some of those are really, really interested in what we're doing with Spectrum. But we will be producing all of our own trainers and coaches anyway. Because the next biggest problem that we have is undoing and unpicking what this flipping government have managed to do. And they've created more mental health issues than anything else. Separation does that to you. You know, if you look at a biopsychosocial model of mental well-being, the social model, the social part of that is a third of your existence. So if they break a third of your existence apart and they impact on your mental capacity, it's only a matter of time before you become ill.
Yes, I know. I mean, even before COVID, that you've been deeply researching and been a coach for a long time, and also in the World Freedom Alliance, you know, we've had so many meetings, interviews to boil this down to the action plan, the World Freedom Alliance action plan. And one of the points there is to take care of the individual. Like you say, if the individual knows its rights, if you have your mental health, if you're based on love and spirit, you know, the collective thrives. Right. So could you talk a little bit more about your research and the coaching that you've been involved in for a long time?
So my job towards the end of my military career was to find out why we were losing so many people. And we were losing some really great recruits, you know, so our go-home rates were pretty significant. So I went around and I looked at all of the organizations that were involved in personal development. I went and looked at some of the mental health organizations like Combat Stress. And as an analyst, I was asking some very pertinent questions, like if someone was going to buy your products, why would they buy them? What results do you get that would attract new customers? Because these are questions that you'd ask to any business. The bottom line is, if you say you're a sales company, but you don't make any sales, you're not a sales company. You know, it's as simple as that. So some very simple questions and pertinent questions to find out that an awful lot of these organizations do not even validate their processes. And they don't validate it because there's no competition. So a competitive environment produces excellence. And of course, what I concluded from all of the research that I did was that we had a great thinking model for training, and we had a great behavioral model for training, but we didn't have a great emotional model that when somebody started to struggle, that we could support them emotionally through that transition. So, for instance, if you decide, well, I'm going to be the chairman of the World Freedom Alliance, you've got all these people who are chipping away, and some people agree and some people don't. That becomes an emotional journey, and of course, that's then down to your strength, isn't it? To how confident you are to keep pushing through, and then eventually you get into a space where it's all okay. But there's transition. You go through a period of transition. So for some guys, the transition is just too much. They give up. So becoming a soldier for some people was just too much of an idea because they were still civilians in their minds. And of course, we had no way of supporting that transition emotionally. So I then created something called transition coaching, Spectrum transition coaching. And I started to apply it, and it got results very quickly. So then I thought, well, okay, I might be imagining that I'm getting results, because we can often think we're better than we are, right? Especially when people start to follow you, and this is where ego is born, isn't it? You know, you notice the moment somebody speaks at one of the rallies, if lots of people listen to them, they start to go, oh, well, actually, I'm going to select the rallies that I speak at, and I'm going to say no to some. And you see this ego is born, right? But in reality, what transition coaching is about getting you back to a level of authenticity by getting rid of the illusions. And the illusions are always the emotions that we experience. So, you know, anger, sadness, fear. So I created a system whereby if you'd been traumatized during your early childhood or at any point in your life, we had a way of changing your relationship with that trauma. Because it's the trauma that generally stops you from going into the future. I introduced performance coaching to the British Army in 2003, and it worked for around 60% of the people that we introduced it to, but it didn't work for the 40% because they got more baggage, they got more emotional baggage. And so I realised when I created it that I was in the wrong place to deliver it. Being in the military was not the place to tell people that the only true emotion is love. You know, I mean, I remember being stood in front of some rooms and saying that, and people were thinking, "Oh, he's a bit of a tree hugger, this man. He's a bit of a hippie." And of course, you couldn't really be a hippie in the military, could you? I mean, when I joined, it was actually illegal to be gay. You know what I mean? Oh, absolutely, it was. Yeah, it was illegal. You couldn't be in the military if you were gay. And I'm sure there was a few blokes in there that were gay, you know, but they kept it quiet. And I have no issue whether you are or whether you're not. For me, you know, as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. So then I then went into some of the other arenas. So I went into the world of trauma. I got out and I started to run change programs, and I ran some change programs that were designed to help people with PTSD that have been diagnosed, and we started to get more and more results. And I ran research alongside of those. So all of the research is with highly complex demographics. So they're with combat veterans, they're with people that had comorbidities such as alcohol addiction, drug addiction, porn, social media, you know, so these were all little distractions that they created, not so little for them, but the distractions that they created because of their problems. And so we then ran the system, and we've been running it ever since. And then I had a little breakthrough, but now we're in a position where I've developed systems for young people, systems for older people, and the results we're getting are phenomenal.
Wow, amazing.
Put it this way, there's not much, you know, I've been out there for a number of years now, and I don't know anything else that's out there that's totally dedicated to somebody's emotional transition. And what we find is when people experience spectrum, is their bodies get well. So the mind-body connection, you know, biopsychosocial. And when you look at when somebody starts to heal in their mind, how their body follows suit, and then all of a sudden their social environment, if it supports their change, they stay with it. And if it doesn't, they leave it. So drug addicts often, when they've done the change, if they're surrounded by drug addicts, they'll leave that group. Exactly. Because the values won't allow them to stay, and they're now emotionally light enough to make the decision.
It's so, like becoming conscious of your choices, you know. It's
totally.
Like, yeah, and you know, I worked as a coach for like, I think it was 10 years or something. I mean, I've heard so many stories you wouldn't believe. I mean, I've heard everything.
Yeah.
And you probably have too, you know. And in a way, when you've heard so many people's stories, you know, you just see, you start to see so clearly for yourself also, and you kind of become detached from the stories as well. Okay, it's this one. It's not that many stories that go around. No. It's like the usual stuff, you know.
No, you're right, Maneka.
But when you become aware of them, and I mean, why I worked as a coach as well was because of this. It's like, if you become conscious of your stories, if you become conscious of yourself, you are free to make your choices. And
of course, depending on how traumatized you are, because one of the teases with, if you look at some of the approaches like CBT and EMDR and IMT and psychodynamic approaches, they require for people to talk about their trauma. They're trauma focused. And of course, I didn't want that. So I decided I wanted a system where people did not have to talk about the detail of their trauma. Because what some of those systems did was they would get all of this trauma going on in somebody's nervous system, and then they had no way of getting rid of that. IEMT and EMDR
pathways, yeah.
Yes, and then all of a sudden now these people, especially with soldiers, they're living in a shed for a week, or they're off into the woods. They're running off into the woods, you know, to go back to something that makes them feel safe. Or they're putting high velocity rifles on their window ledge, waiting to be attacked. You know, so. And of course, counsellors might not even know this. So I'm not having a pop at any of the other systems. I'm just saying that if you look at the statistics, if you look at the research, the dropout rates for those therapies are huge for that reason. I mean, you'd be lucky if you presented trauma as a veteran. You'd be lucky if you saw someone within the first year anyway. So there was never really the availability of people to deal with the numbers, and you've got to ask yourself why. You've got to ask yourself why that is the case. And we said to combat stress when we first met them. I met combat stress with Lord Curry and the guy that was responsible for the head of psychiatry. And it became very apparent very quickly. They didn't want to know any approaches that worked.
No,
because
exactly.
you're doing the might of a job. Walter Brucetil, I'm convinced, thought we were going to do is take his job. And of course, these are the nervous gatekeepers that have no character. The likes of Boris Johnson, he's got no character. He's never been tested. You know, if I look at Christopher, right, and I saw him in the middle of those six policemen, I'm thinking that takes character. Boris Johnson lies like a cheap watch. That takes no character. There's no character involved with that. And of course, if he'd ever been part of a system that tested him, he wouldn't have been within it for longer than 5 minutes. But you see, these are English schoolboys that have been taught a system that teaches them that if they lie like cheap watches and they deceive and they mislead people, that's the way you are. That's what you should be at the level of where you're going.
I mean, everything is turned upside down. You know, if you were in the Viking age here in Scandinavia, you know, if you didn't act in honor, your head would be chopped off.
Totally.
Like that, like chop off, bye.
And they rely on the gentleness and kindness.
I'm not promoting that in any way, saying that it's okay.
No, we get that, but ultimately, you know, if you take it back to its basics, be honourable in your contracts, cause no harm.
And now it's the opposite. You know, if you're dishonourable and you do a lot of harm, you get at the top of this fake pyramid that people believe in. As long as you believe in it, it's going to stay there.
And isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting if you're going to provide a very, very efficient system that caters for everyone within that system, it then has to be the other way around. It has to be honourable. It has to be objective. It can't be subjective, because if it is, it falls apart. So the military was a great system because it was honourable in what it did. It knew what it was doing. You know, I mean, is it honourable to go and kill people? No, absolutely not. It's not, under any guise that you want to put it. One of the things I see with veterans that don't recover from PTSD is because they've killed people. It's against your spirit, your soul to do that. You know, and there are some things that you can do and get away with it. Some things you can do and you'll never get away with it.
Yeah.
You know, so you can find your own peace, but essentially, when you step over that line, you step over a significant threshold. But of course, the system would bluff you. I mean, when you look at the current psyop that's going on, and you look at that guy Harari, right? No one has ever challenged him openly because they don't have the questioning skill sets to do it. But the average person that's a nice person would rip his argument apart. Whoever on this earth was put on for the purpose of saying that any other human being is lower or greater than themselves. You know, he has no right to say that people are useless human beings, and no one's ever challenged his thinking on that. When people are putting him on this pedestal, that's the danger of ego. He wants us to believe that we're completely powerless. Well, I'd say to him, put a sword in your hand, stand in front of me with a sword in your hand, and we'll see how powerless we really are. Because there are lots of men like me out there. I only need to look at Christopher, I only need to look at some of the other guys that will stand, and they will fight if they need to. And of course, the last thing we want is anything like that. But you see, what they bank on is agitating us to a point where we get to that point. The perfect scenario for them is what's happening in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Because if they can get all the people rising, people will then, the average people who don't really know what's going on will say, please help us, government, and put in any measures that you want to put in that stop this from happening.
Yeah. And I think that's why, you know, in Sweden also, I'm heading the New Earth Scandinavia. It's I mean, really to bring back our sovereignty, create the networks to just support ourselves. And it's been so threatening. You know, the mainstream media has just attacked me for this, lied about it, and tried to rip it apart. And even, you know, one land that we were buying, they were knocking on the neighbors' doors, talking shit about me and the project. So of course, then the seller didn't want to sell to us. Now we have land and we have everything, you know, so I can talk about it. But I think it's so threatening when people really become sovereign, not only in their heart and soul, but actually, like you say, start to act, start to get up from their sofas. And
it takes a character, Maneka, to enjoy a character. You know, when you've got character, when you've got authenticity, and you know who you are in here, you can deal with authenticity. If you're not authentic and you don't come from your sovereign being, then you find everyone challenging. you know, because you're not authentic. Authenticity starts and finishes in here. And, you know, when you can be the same person in every environment you go into, you don't need these personalities, which are trained in us, by the way. When you don't need any of those personalities, which are just ego states, when you can talk from here and you're sovereign, it's easy to talk to other sovereign beings.
Exactly. And you recognize them as well, just like you said about my husband. Like, of course, what I saw in him as well, like, okay, he's a real human being is what he's not a
kind man. and it's the kind men they need to worry about. The man that wants to be left alone, those are the men they should worry about, not the ones that are out there telling the world what they're going to do. You know, we've acted silently. We've moved silently. People don't even know we trained tens of thousands of people. We had somebody come on, and you see, I refuse to take any interviews with the newspapers. So I've had you know, the world, some of the world newspapers trying to contact me to say that, you know, to ask me my thoughts on what I'm doing, and I said, not interested at all, because you give them credibility just by the very nature of the fact you connect with them. So for me, no joinder, no credibility, no conversation. Make up what you like, but you won't be doing it based on saying that you've had dialogue with me. And of course, ego is the opposite. If I look at some of the people that then love the idea that Sky News want to interview them, I go, great, but they'll never sell you the way you want to be sold.
No.
The mainstream media, anything that comes from mainstream media, I would question and triangulate my knowledge on that, you know, and that's what you said earlier. So it is not trustworthy. And of course, this is what they want. If you look at the video that Barack Obama did, where he's talking to that group of students, telling them how to bring down a society, tell me that they aren't doing that right now. They've created so much confusion that people don't know what to believe. And that's why you have to go back to your basics. I'm a sovereign being. I come from God. I'm divine, whatever God is for me. For me, it's a source of love and kindness. You know, for me, cause no harm, loss, or injury to anyone else, and be honorable in your contracts. If you can do that, you're halfway to owning your world.
Oh, well, beautifully put, Mick. I think that kind of comes to the last question for you, actually, because as I said, you know, we're boiling all the, you know, visions, ideas, and actions together in the World Freedom Rights Action Plan. And I guess what you just said there is so important. But would you talk a little bit more about that, and how we as a community and just like a human family again coming together with that, just like you say, there's no one telling you what to do, there's no one you know, setting the agenda, but we want to boil it down to just take action aligned together.
Well, that's cool. And all you need to do is create. So for me, the way to marry that up is to create a model of excellence. So when we were meeting with a group of people a few weeks ago in Stratford, we were talking about what we're going to do is we're going to create models of excellence. So one for farming, for instance, growing. So people that don't know anything about growing, if you create a community and a model for growing, and there was a couple of guys that spoke on this who were experts in this. So then they create a model that you can train in others. And that model, it can be placed on the website, or it can be a face-to-face type stuff. But essentially, it's got to be trainable. So that if you can train it, you can repeat it. You know, you're not giving them fish, then you're giving them a fishing rod, aren't you? So you're showing them how to grow, as opposed to giving them food that really they don't even know how it got there. You know, we've become disempowered because our food comes from a supermarket. If we knew how to grow it, we might actually sort of go, well, we're not going to the supermarket today. I've got a place in France, and all the farmers literally they live off their own fruit and vegetables, and do you know what I mean? So I'm sure they go to the supermarket for some things, but it's certainly not veg and fruit. And so you produce a model of excellence for every pillar that you want to put out there. And that's what's happening in the UK. There's a financial model of excellence. So we've now got a mental health and well-being model of excellence. We're gonna put that out there and train as many people that want to learn it. And if it's a true model of excellence, people will naturally want to follow it. But it's got to be excellent. So essentially, for me, the answer is to produce all those models of excellence and offer them. And from that, you will naturally create communities. And of course, it doesn't need to be led by any one individual. It can be led just by the model. And for me, that's where common law is very strong, because it's not one person saying, this is my system. It's a divine system that translates at the level of our spirit. So for me, if the model is really, if it is a true model of excellence, people will go, wow, that's getting results, I'm going to copy that. And then the model can evolve, because the model can be validated and it can be adapted to suit any nuances that come from the experience, and also for different situations that we find ourselves in where we deliver it.
But I think what you created also, Mick, I mean, they're like working also with the New Earth Project for many, many years, and doing a lot of that, like lifting up different examples and like permaculture and financial models and social models, etc. I think what you created in the Guardians 300 as well is the implementation, is a model to actually, spread the world and do it, and a model of action.
That's so important, Maneka, because a lot of people just talk, and it's never, war fighting is about momentum and strategy, right? So if you create enough momentum by doing, you've got to create the doing momentum. And it doesn't matter how badly you do something, because you can always learn, right? And you learn from things that don't go right. You don't learn from things that go perfectly every time you do them. So be okay with not being perfect. Get it rolling, get the energy rolling, because energy attracts energy. And so, a lot of it is in the doing, and that we were adamant that what we were going to do is deliver all those programs as quickly as we did. Some of the trainers, when we went up and trained in Dundee, they had 170 people in the wings waiting to be trained by the time they got back. And then the ripple spread, and we're now interfacing with organizations that have millions of worldwide followers. And so for me, that's about the doing.
Exactly, because it's so important to, of course, that comes with knowing your sovereignty, knowing your responsibility in a way. But we're not used to taking that, or many people are not used to taking that, those steps into
well, and of course you do get infiltrators in all of these places, right? So all you simply do is you have a set of behaviors that you're happy. These are our behaviors, and we make a behavioral list. So these are the behaviors of one of our trainers. If you don't produce these behaviors, catch you later. Nothing personal. We'll catch you later. When you're ready to do these behaviors, you're part of our team. And of course, don't waste any time on infiltrators. There's thousands of them. There are people that are infiltrators. They don't even know they're infiltrators. Because what they do is actively slow your system down, or they create blind alleys, or they'll stop things from moving forwards. And if they produce any of those behaviors, they're not with your energy. Energy is about momentum. And if we're going to create momentum, anything that stops your momentum, say cheerio to it.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of civilian organizations don't do that, because they want to give someone the benefit of the doubt, and they want to pull them back in. And that's great. And I love that as a concept, when you have the time to do that. When you have infinite amount of time, no problem. But we don't have that. No. And of course, we're on catch up, because they've been planning this for so many years. But essentially what they don't have is our level of intellect. And we're coming from love. They're coming from satanic stuff. I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that, but the more I've seen and the more I've experienced, you realize that this is truly a spiritual war. And the people that are coming from love, it's already won. All we've got to do is create so much of that through deed and strength, because there is nothing more formidable than a male warrior who knows how to love. Nothing more formidable. And there's nothing more formidable than a woman that supports a male warrior to become confident enough to love. It is a symbiotic relationship. So if you've got 700 men stood in front of you that will take you for a beer and love you, but are happy to beat you up if you don't, if you're going to aggress them, that's the ultimate warrior. You know, I've got a grandson there's a warrior and a half. He's an international standard boxer. And yet he's a love machine.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And it's lovely to see because he's a nice boy. And you want our men should be of that nature. If we're going to win this, they can't be brutal. Anyone can be brutal. I was looking at some video footage of the situation in Ukraine, which is a total illusion, by the way. You know, and some of my soldier friends, if they see this, will say, "Oh, bloody hell, Mick's lost his mind." But you know, when you start to see the bigger picture, you realise the bullshit that you're being fed. You start to realise this is just a total illusion, you know. And we know the next illusions they're going to create when this one starts to die down a little bit. And they're all smoke and mirrors so that, you know, they can get on with implementing technocracy. That's we know that's the bigger picture.
It feels like right now, if you could say a little bit about the world as it is now, and I mean, from my perspective, what we're seeing is that the ones that we're opposing, they're speeding up their agenda because in a way they're losing. That's what I see. So they're really speeding up the agenda and making us look at Ukraine, look at this, look at that, and like all these fires. And you know what I think is we need to just keep our focus and do our thing.
Totally.
And like
where focus goes, energy follows. Simple as that. So you get what you focus on. There's a lovely exercise that I do with people when I first teach them how to be coaches, and it's called the gorilla exercise. And I show them a video, and a lot of people know this is out there. You can have a look at it. It's called you know, the gorilla exercise. It's a perception test. And what it shows you is that if you're focused on the white shirts of the basketball players, and it shows you a group of people that are playing basketball, you miss a gorilla that literally walks through the screen. And of course, if you're focused on the white shirts, you miss the gorilla. So the key thing is whatever you focus on, you get. So this is why with infiltrators, I don't really worry about them. I just literally sort of go, well, we're not interested. We're going in that direction. And they lose energy. Because if you've got the majority of your team going in one direction, then that becomes unstoppable. So for me, the smoke and mirrors is about distraction anyway. They want you to focus on all the niff-naff and trivia that's going on. You know, Ukraine is such just such bullshit. I mean, I saw footage of a reporter just the other day, right? And a lot of people wouldn't get this. I was a royal engineer when I joined the military. So we did minefield clearances. That was one of our jobs. I'm looking at a reporter stood alongside a man with a mine detector, yeah? And the person that's videoing them is actually in the minefield. And so a lot of people wouldn't see that. They wouldn't get that. And it doesn't make me clever. It just makes me, you know, it just allows me to say to you the level of bullshit that we're being shown. Does that make sense? And then when you start to look at some of the photos that they've used, they're just photos of Lebanon. You know, they're photos of previous things. So, and they do that because this is part of the game. You know, it creates so much at the level of smoke and mirrors that the average person that believes everything they see on mainstream TV. You know, I asked my partner's dad the other day because he said, "Oh, you know what's going on in Ukraine?" And blah blah. He said Russia are X, Y, and Z, and I said, "How do you know they are?" But no one ever actually challenges people's perspective. I said, "How do you know that's true? What you're seeing?" You know, with VGA these days, you can create anything. You can even make Paris look like it's on fire. You can make London look like it's under attack if you really wanted to. And if it went out on mainstream media, you know, the Kirk are just watching the smoke and mirrors, and that's how they're hypnotizing people. And of course, as you see incrementally from that hypnosis, when people are confused, then what they do incrementally is they slip in little messages that prepare the way. Oh, well, you know, we're now doing X, Y, and Z and monkeypox and all of these things. Now, you notice what happened with monkeypox. People ridiculed it the moment it came out. So what did they do? They stopped it. If you look at your phone now, I get emails. You go chat and they're saying, what do you think about the current situation with monkeypox? Those are marketing strategies so that they can get how social media is reacting to the bullshit psyops that they're putting out there.
Yeah.
So they get immediate feedback. They get immediate feedback on whether or not what they're doing is effective or not. And all they simply do is when it's not effective, they change the tack and incrementally sort of take us down a road where we become desensitized to this new normal. The new normal is just a desensitization process, getting everybody incrementally to accept less than they had. It's the oldest sales trick in the book. This would have cost you 500 quid, but we're going to
What
give
do you
you
think then moving forward? Because a lot of people are worried about this winter and autumn and the trick that they're going to pull.
Start preparing. Don't wait for anyone to prepare you. Start growing. If you can grow, and if you can't grow, find a community that grows. Prepare the way for your own food. Prepare for this to be tough, so that when it arrives, it's not a surprise. You know, ultimately, I've got enough wood now. And by the way, you've got to remember, right? So even with tree surgeons in the UK, if you want wood for a fire, tree surgeons have to pay to get rid of some of the wood that they chop down. So if you know a tree surgeon, you contact them and you just say, look, you know, any wood you've got going, drop it off and we'll give you your petrol money. And we've had literally tons of wood dropped here, just from guys that have to pay to get rid of it. Now you think about that, you have to pay to get rid of green waste. When actually they melt it down, they mold it down, make it into mulch and sell it as compost. Do you know what I mean? So you can see that we're literally on the receiving end of this scam, really. But what I would say is stand in your own power. Remember that no one is going to help you. And the moment you realize no one is going to help you, everyone will. Because you won't be reliant on anyone else. The moment you become less reliant on anyone, you automatically attract that community, funnily enough. Because the majority of what we pull in comes from here. So when we decide to take action and we decide to help ourselves, that's who we attract. So get into a community. You can change your synchronicity just by joining a group. You can change all of your potential just by joining a group. So if you're worried about where this is going, I'm not sure how you're entitled to worry, but I'm not sure how worrying is going to help. That's exactly what they want you to do. The thing is, get used to the idea that they're going to be reducing things to the point where they can stretch us to the point where people give up so that everyone buys into the digitized system. If you can withstand that and resist that, and it's not that difficult to do if you really decide to do it, then you're going to be one of the people at the end of it that is sovereign and actually will make a difference.
Yeah, so true, Mick. Really, I mean, me and Dolores often talk about that. I mean, what kind of needs do you have as a human being? It's not that complicated, you know.
No, it's not.
Food, we need clean water. We need a roof over our head, you know, to keep the good temperature. And we need love, basically.
Totally.
And it's not that. We have to kind of come back to that simplicity as well.
The rest is what we want, not what we need. You know, one of the things my old sergeant major said to me, said when I first joined the military, he said, I want you to make a list of everything that you want to survive the next 16 weeks, because I'm going to show you how to do without it. So make a list of everything that you want and make a list of everything you actually need, and you'll find there's a bit of a difference in those two things.
And I think, you know, it's a bit embarrassing. I watch kind of different things that a lot of other people watch just to study it. You know, I was watching the Kardashians, if you've seen it, just to see what is this about. Like, a lot of people are actually watching this. You know, I was studying it. And you get like, there's a lot of things that you don't need at all, you know.
It's the antithesis.
So it feels like we're kind of being fed this picture that the perfect life is a complete waste. You know, a lot of these things that we don't need at all.
Totally.
That's the kind of ideal that we're being fed, you know.
And the beauty of when you decide to grow your own things, when you're going to meet other people. and you're going to meet other people that are literally resonating at the same level. And the thing is, as you start to create more communities, you get such a happiness in some of the old simple things. I mean, when I took a group of people on expedition to Sardinia, and we bumped into some Italians, and we were staying on a campsite, and then we'd go and ride 130, 140 kilometers, and we'd come back in, and we were circumnavigating the whole of Sardinia on mountain bikes. But wherever we went, we bumped into a group of Italians, and the Italians used to sit around the table at night, playing the guitar with the family, and we used to have a sing-song with some of them. And of course, for me, we should never underestimate the power of just having dinner together. And those are and to be honest with you, I think a lot of the happiness comes from very, very simple, uncomplicated things. And at the bottom line is create more connections, create as many connections as you can within your communities, so that when things do get difficult, you'll be amazed at how our nature is to share and support each other. It's our nature.
Exactly. And we need to trust that nature and to keep it simple, right? And
yeah,
just do
keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yes. That's an old military saying, isn't it?
Keep it simple, stupid. That's what they used to say. KISS.
Exactly.
They call it KISS, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And not like buy into all these stories and put them on each other and say that, oh, I'm a victim, and oh, I'm this, and you should do that. And no, take a deep breath, and like you said, what do I need? How can I supply that? How can I support my community? How can I?
And you'd be amazed how quickly you adapt as well, Maneka. When you throw yourself into, and you have to survive, and you'd be amazed how quickly you can adapt to those environments. And you just need some models to follow, and this is the pillars. If you get a good model to follow, that will save you a lot of pain. And so there are communities that are already creating this in the UK. The One Club being one of them. They've got pillars. You've got a guy called Jason Noble who's created a new Great Britain, essentially. So these are guys that are creating models of excellence. Copy the models of excellence. If I wanted to grow something, I go onto a little app on Telegram, and they've now got the sovereign growers.
Oh wow, amazing!
And so now I know how to make compost. Now I've got loads of stuff going on in the back. It tells you what to plant, when to plant, how to select, and so these are things that if you haven't got the knowledge to do something, it's all there. Yeah. You've just got to be active enough to do it. If you are inactive, if you're passive in your life, and you decide to become a passenger, then that's where you're going anyway. So and that's a choice, by the way. Some people say, well, I can't. Well, actually, can't is just a limiting belief. When people say to me, I can't, I say, well, how can you? That's the only question you can ask. How can you? And
in a way, I think part of the mind brainwash is to make us believe that we're weak. Also,
but the thing is, right, when you can get something in 4 minutes that used to take a week, you start to expect that thing to arrive in 4 minutes. That doesn't mean that that's the norm.
No,
that's just.
But I believe. We need to remember how incredibly strong we are.
Totally.
Because I know also from my experience, I've gone through a lot in my life, and in a way, it's in those moments when it's really bad, when it's really tough, that either you find that inner strength, and you realize, oh my God, I have so much power in here. Like I can do like 100 times more than I thought I could.
Totally. Well, and that's the irony of convenience, you see, because it teaches you to be helpless. We can't even grow a potato. If you can't grow a potato, how are you going to eat? So ultimately, stepping into your sovereignty, stepping into your power is about just taking ownership. I am responsible for everything I create. If you can even, and I'm talking about everything in life, and some people might say, well, I wasn't responsible for my trauma. No, you weren't, but by the nature of the fact you were there, you were in it. Now, you can either define yourself by that, or you can create something else. And of course, the power to know that you can do that is really important. I'm also very aware that some people are so traumatized that they can't get out of that mindset until they're light enough to get into a different mindset. And that's what we do. That's what we help them with. But once you're into that the mindset of ownership and you understanding that you do create everything, that's a very powerful space to be. That's the last place the government want you in.
And in a way, like not fighting fire with fire, you know, how do you light up a dark room? You turn on the light.
Totally.
Like you don't put more darkness in there.
No.
Like you said, how do you change a brain that's gone wild in the motorways that are negative?
Yeah.
It's not.
Energy breeds energy.
Yeah, it's not about being more negative. It's about really focusing on the positive to actually change.
This is only going to be won through strength of character, peace, and love. That's the only way it's going to be won. And when that outnumbers anything aggressive, aggression disappears. You can't, it takes two people to argue, or more than two people. But initially, it takes two people. If one person decides not to argue, there is no argument. But you've got to be able to stand in your own strength to actually not argue, to not engage. So that's part of your personal power, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually was involved, when I was working as a coach, I was involved in some science and working with some professionals into brain science, actually, and how to activate your full potential and your whole, brain potential, because a lot of people, they're stuck in survival mode, and then actually they don't use their full potential. And the the conclusions of that research that we did was thankfulness, to be in thankfulness, to focus on the positive and what you want to create, and to be completely accepting and aware of your emotions, and to just acceptance and let it be fully as it is. And the third thing was, you can call it meditation, but you can also call it just awareness of being able to watch your own mind and your own system and your surroundings.
Yeah, it's like becoming the observer, isn't it?
And not just jumping on any thought or emotion straight away, just being able to.
And a great coaching question that I give to all of the guys that we work with is, how did I create this? So every situation you're in, if you were to ever ask yourself, how did I create that situation? That's a great start point. And people that really don't have any ownership will say, well, I didn't create it. Because they believe actually that they're not responsible for what they create. Ultimately, you are the owner of everything that you create. When you understand that is like a mind blower. It's a mind blower because you start to realize your power. If I can create that in my world without blame and judgment, I can create that by doing something different. If I knew how I became chubby, I know how to become slim. I stopped doing what made me become chubby. Does that make sense? So the key thing is when you understand that you have routines for everything and that you create everything, these are powerful spaces to come from. And I do get that people can't often think outside of their own frame. That's why they employ coaches. The essence of transition coaching is for us to let you know all of the parts of your life that have brought you to what you do right now. And once you have that awareness, for some people, that's a massive light bulb moment because they go, blimey, now I understand what I do.
Yes, just realizing that immense power in knowing your sovereignty and your responsibility. And it's not about guilt. A lot of people go like, well, this is what Harari wants to take away from you. He wants you to believe. He's very clever in his message because what he does is he uses a lot of patterns in there. He uses a lot of hypnotic patterns in there. And he does embedded suggestion. He uses embedded suggestion a lot. He wants you to believe that the people are no longer powerful and they can actually control your mind. Bullshit is what I say. Prove that you can. Anyone can make a statement to that effect. And of course, I hear lots of people out there saying there's systems out there that can change your mind, make you do X, Y, and Z. Well, I'll tell you what, when we're in extreme situations, I've never seen anyone that can predict what anyone can do. So for me, I go, that's what they want you to believe. And this is part of the fear porn that's out there. So they're now putting fear porn around water filters, telling you that it's a big scam. It's not a big scam. I've tested water with an electrolysis system.
So for hidden particles, and I can assure everyone that there's fear porn out there. So what you've got to do to be sovereign is you've got to do what Maneka was saying earlier. Triangulate your information, chat to people that are using it, chat to people that are getting benefits from it, and ask them what benefits they're getting. And just by the nature of the fact you do that, you not only do you create a greater synchronicity, but you create access to people that we might never have met. I mean, Maneka, I've never met so many clever people in my life until I decided to go to Trafalgar Square and speak. And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by Deloriers and barristers and, you know, people that are lovely people. And people that in lots of ways don't have any egos. So for me, that's the, you know, that's the test of the metal, really. All right, Vicky. Yeah, okay.
Round up. Well, thank you so much, Mick. This is so valuable, and we hope to really, you know, duplicate what you created and support you in any way we can in the World Freedom Alliance, just to spread this self-sovereignty movement across the world, because I think that is really key to. And
of course, we've got some real great trainers that are happy to do, if there's anything that people need, if anyone's interested in that, they can contact you and we can do it on behalf of the World Freedom Alliance. We've got guys that will blow their mind at the level of sovereignty.
Amazing. Thank you, Mick. Thank you so much for being on. I'm really looking forward, actually. I mean, a lot of people are worried about the future. I'm not. I'm really not. No, because I believe in all of these people that are waking up now and know their sovereignty, and
people are waking up.
We're going to just build something much more beautiful. I'm really sure of it.
Well, the tighter they squeeze, the more we will waken up. That's what I believe.
Exactly.
They've got to squeeze a bit tighter.
Thank you so much, Mick.
Take care, Maneka.
Take care.